Thank you, Dino. And thank you very much for inviting me to be part of this. It's really fantastic. I hope it offers something to you. When we're doing a project like the one I'm going to talk about, it's a roller coaster ride of wrangling with regulations and lots of outmoded things. So it's nice to be able to present something in a calm way. And I think as we talk about the way architecture needs to change, it needs to be more about outcomes than outputs. So the outcomes are really important, and it's about putting it out in the world. So I'm a director of NMBW Architects in Melbourne. We're based in Fitzroy, and I want to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands that we work upon and we live, and pay respects to the elders. We take very seriously the responsibility and the joy of working with the land. Our office in Fitzroy is full of models, materials. We try to be in the world, bring the world to us. A screenshot from our server. This is our local research folders. We're always looking at the world around us at all sorts of scales, city scale, building scale, right down to the material pieces, as you saw in the office previously. And we always sort of think of everything being like a renovation. So a lot of our early work was renovations, but we also, even when we did a big project, we thought of it as a sort of renovation of the city, and that we're working with evolution. And that's how we approach a lot of our projects. This is the project I'm going to speak about from outside, just in the street one day with clients, and it is a renovation of an existing building. This is the main central space where we cut out a big piece of the concrete slab to allow light right through the building and put in new skylights. I'm going to talk about that more, but first of all, I also just want to tie it into teaching work. So we run research and design studios, and there's something really fantastic about the experimental nature that can bring with it, and it relates to what I'm going to speak about today. So this is a project which was a small bird hide. It was a design build project with students where they designed and made a small structure. And thinking about larger systems of networks of materials and construction, we used floorboards that came off a project directly. So the students actually were involved. They sent all the timber through a thicknesser to prepare it for this project. So they're working directly with materials at the very intimate scale, thinking about the larger sort of construction systems of undoing a house to become something else. And then at a larger scale, the bird hide is in a sensitive area. It's a Ramsar site on Western Port. So it was fabricated in a workshop and brought to site and assembled in a number of days to minimise the impact in this sensitive environment. This is them presenting, so rather than presenting in the institution, the university presenting on site, our guest critics planting trees, being involved in a very personal way. And if we think about the site and the migratory system, it's a global scale. So even though they're working at a very small scale, the impact is global. So a few terms that I like to use when thinking about this approach is attending. So it's more than observation. It's observing but doing and not doing, being in tune with things. Making with, so not just making but making with, and that's in many terms of collaboration, making with the existing, making with natural systems. And also it's about being comfortable being in a process of making with, and it's not for everyone because it's really it does require collaboration. It's not as in control as other ways of making. And our practice, many of our projects start with this approach of thinking about the making. So it's not that we sort of do this sketch and go, okay, how are we going to make it? We actually start, part of the actual essence of the design is thinking about the making. And just to flick through a couple of other projects before I get onto the main one I want to speak about. This is this was a small project in Box Hill in Melbourne, and it was an old single-use tennis clubhouse building, and the culture around that site over decades had changed. It was much more multicultural. So what was needed was a facility which was much more diverse in its offering. So it's now a multi-purpose sports and just a sort of gathering space, really. But what we did was evolve the tennis house building. So it's not sort of eradicated and wiped out of history. But the footprint becomes something else. The bricks are reused. So this idea of evolving and in this case using the material system that exists. This is another project, some of you may know, it's a reconfiguration of part of the University of Melbourne. It's called the New Student Precinct. It was done, run by Rawsons Architects in Melbourne. We were one of a number of smaller practices involved. And one of the key moves was to remove this sort of artificial ground that had been developed over time. We're tying the buildings together, sort of doing all these things, but it sort of removed the life from the actual real ground. And in terms of the cultural history, a river, a sort of creek, if you like, had run through this site. So there was this history, and part of the project was to bring back this connection to the ground. So we knew that this stair was going to be demolished. And in the end, you can see here this sense of the evolution and the trace of the existing. So we're interested in the idea of evolving and sort of allowing multiple layers of history to exist. And there are many moments in our projects where we see things and we go, wow, that's really beautiful, but they don't stay, they're covered over. And I guess part of the shift in what I'm talking about today is sort of finding ways, and it's really just through practice, where we can work more with the existing. So in this case, we run back to our studio and we dig up our trusty trade manuals to understand what we've seen, which is this incredible smokestack of chimneys. And we put it away for future. So back to the main project. This is what it was. It was a 1970s factory, actually built in two parts. There's an east building and a west building, covering the site 100% with a concrete slab. Sort of kind of probably built as cheap as possible. There it is from a distance, and it's right on the edge of a commercial area to a residential area. You can see here some views around. There's a street on one side and a laneway on two sides. It was a factory, and our clients wanted it to become the brief was a co-working space. So it was going from a sort of very big floor plan with very little natural light to a habitable, they really wanted to make a quality workspace. So early on, we're quite quick to establish the key principles. It was about getting light in, natural ventilation, and another part of the brief was that they wanted it to feel more like a home than an office. So a series of views. I'm just going to show you, it's sort of in a way different to how it turned out, but the sort of framework is set quite early on in terms of making a series of courtyard spaces, so actually cutting through some of the concrete slab, connecting with the real ground, sort of repairing, if you like, the relationship to the laneway, being generous to the surrounding residential area. Here's a view of one of the small corner courtyard spaces. And also, this is just a reference project which we showed them early on, which is the Maribyrnong Defence Site, which is this sort of beautiful sort of ruinous state. And they really liked this. So from the beginning, we were sort of aligned with this sense of not trying to sort of make over the existing building as though, it was new. We were working with it. So I'm just going to talk through the project a bit to show it to you. Quite a lot of it was about taking away, as I say, to bring light into the building. So taking away this central slab, taking away the walls to better connect the co-working space. New skylights to the roof. You can see the floor plan here. the courtyard's in the corner, the central garden space, which is vegetated, and on the upper level, co-working space with a number of meeting rooms. So the idea was that people, can have these shared facilities of a kitchenette and meeting rooms. And here's that central space with the garden, the new stairway up to the upper level. One of the corner courtyards, so again, more of the first floor was removed to make these double height spaces. This is the northeast corner, so it gets a lot of lovely light. The kitchen opens up to it. This is just sort of like not quite finished, but it's now got a sort of kitchen garden down that lower level. And this is the laneway corner. Another part of the project was that the clients wanted not just a domestic kitchen, more like a residential kitchen than a sort of kitchenette. So somewhere they could have proper dinners. The bathrooms also, they didn't want the sort of line-up of commercial toilets where everything's the same. So there was this sort of, difference developed throughout the bathrooms. Here's one of the, this is a phone booth for private calls tucked into an existing opening under the stair, and you can see here, there is a small kitchenette on the upper level. This is looking from the west building across to the east part, so this is a new opening in one of the brick walls, so this was about connecting across the two original buildings to make a connected space. And this is one of the meeting rooms. Another way to think about the project is covering and uncovering. So we painted the exterior but left this sort of dado level of the existing as-found qualities. To improve the thermal performance, that was a really key part of the brief, and that's where we worked really closely with Finding Infinity. Sort of new layers of lining and insulation were added strategically. So Finding Infinity made a thermal model of the project, and they were able to sort of model the effect of each of the different choices, and the clients could choose together with us what level of insulation, what materials to use. So you can see here we kept the old existing factory windows on the outside and put a new layer. And here's new services. This is hydronic heating on the ground floor, so a new screed, so new layers to the building, new services. We've got a greenhouse shade cloth, so when it's very bright, the light is filtered into the space. And so then along the way, as I say, it was modelled, the thermal performance, and then now Finding Infinity are sort of actually monitoring the actual use. So it's taken a while. This is actually a few months old, but it is a process of actually testing the outcome. So a number of our projects, as I said, the early ones, we were interested in this idea of thinking about the making as a design generative tool. But I think the shift for us in this project was thinking really more so also about the unmaking. So, we know that resources are finite, and so if we think about the fact of how to work with an existing building, the unmaking is as important as the making. And so the demolition drawings for us are just as creative acts as the proposals. And here you can see the demolition drawing, the red is to be demolished. Another thing, the other shift that we made with this project was, and we did this in discussion with the QS, was to think about the procurement. So how do you kind of go through the all the approvals process for a commercial, relatively large commercial project, unlike the bird hide that we did with the university that was, much more informal. There's a whole sort of wrangling of regulations to get through, and tendering and costing and stuff. So with the procurement, we built in a way where with the builder would allow for a percentage of reuse materials. We knew we wanted to use them, So we needed them to be costed, but we didn't know how we were going to. We just couldn't know because we didn't have that information. We didn't have enough detailed information, and I'll talk about this more. So you can see here in the documentation this sort of requirement for reuse. So we knew we were going to get a lot of materials coming out. We needed the builder to look after them, and I must say our builder, our foreman on site, was fantastic. He said he preferred reworking buildings than new buildings, so he was just the person we needed. And as I said earlier, we needed people who were really happy to be in this process of thinking about the making, of unmaking, because there's unknowns and there's challenges along the way. We also had a 2-stage tender, so rather than, the building had been a chocolate factory, a very good chocolate factory, and so rather than just say price it to the builder, we had a 2-stage tender where the builder priced the first piece of work, which was to strip back everything to the existing condition, so no structural demolition. And what this did was we were able to work with the builder without the sort of full commitment to be sure that it was the right builder. It de-risked it for the builder because they got to understand the building before sort of committing to the whole complete project. We had a really interesting process of interviewing. The clients were directly involved with speaking about the builder, and a really key question they said was, how do you like to work with the builder? So they knew. So in a way, we had a really fantastic team, not just of consultants, but of builder and client, very much open to this idea of working with a sort of a process which is fraught, a little fraught and unknown, but fantastic. So we were able to be with the builders that we had on site. There was this presence to deal with the materials, and to, in a way, I think, referring to some of the previous comments, this idea of simple complexity, to do a lot with, to do a lot in order to do a little. So here we are on site, early demolition stage. This is this first tender, things being demolished, beautiful moments being found, covered up. This is one of my favourite. This is the old cisterns of the toilet. They got covered up. And here, the stripped back building ready to go into the detailed structural demolition. So to think more about this idea of not just of thinking about the making, but thinking about the unmaking, I'm going to speak through concrete removal, concrete unmaking, brick unmaking, and timber unmaking. So the central garden, thinking about making a garden, was also about thinking about unmaking and coring holes in the concrete slab. Here's the demolition plan, and zooming in you can see working with open work landscape architects. From the beginning, thinking about, this should play, how these holes would be made. So the coring through, the builder bought the biggest core drill they could get. And then on the upper levels, there's different cores. So all these beautiful pieces were made, so these big pieces of concrete, and we couldn't use all of it, and the builders tracked down fantastic places they could go to. But a lot of it we tried to use, and this is when the cores had just been drilled, and there's reusing the pieces in the garden. So that was, Liz from Open Work, very hands-on, down close to the ground, fantastic. And here's the central garden. So thinking about the making of new openings, so in the brickwork, is also thinking about unmaking, and this is where the builder was incredible. So this is looking back from the east building through the new openings in the brickwork, demolition drawings, the proposed sections. And what we discovered was this really quite distinct and quite lovely brick in some of the walls. There was a collection of bricks, and I've since been following up done a bit of research about these bricks. So you can see the striated frontage. The front side is actually for taking hard plaster. It's a sort of textured, and it's a lightweight. So the builder, you can see the stacks of bricks Here they are, I'm going to flick through. There's Liz on site. Patching on site. So there's these traces of the evolution of the brick. Paving, little snippets of brick. This detail in the floor. Another moment where they're cut in the other direction. Thinking about the making, this is now into timber. I haven't got too long to go. And this is sort of about designing it. This is about collaboration. And one thing that this sort of project needs is a network of collaborators. Starting with the material. So part of the demolition was, one of the floor levels was at a different level on the west building. So we had to remove that floor. And what we got was this plywood, as well as, it's the new one. The plywood we used relined the walls, and then the Oregon floor joists. So these would have been really cheap material at the time of the construction in the 1970s. It's now a quite rare material. So what we wanted to do was celebrate it. We worked with a fantastic woodworker, and she worked straight away working with the material. So she went straight to doing not sort of designs and drawings, with little sketches and a model, and this is the beautiful bench that she made. And I think what's kind of interesting is that we have then gone back to do drawings, to understand. So I think part of the process of working with these existing buildings is often that you it's not the same sort of linear idea that you think of with design. So often it's this thing of process of going back and processing and thinking. And what's really, I'm over time, I know, really beautiful about this project is this detail. I'm going to end because it's really about a very small detail, and it's a lot of what people are saying. It's a lot of work to do something simply and beautifully. All this detail is about making precise planes of timber to allow these timber to join so that the rough and weathered as found quality can remain on the exposed surfaces. So I just want to finish with that and thank the collaborator for that and the many other people on the project.